And ain't no way anything could be going on with Jay-Z in 1996. Surely not.
The music industry is currently shaking to its very core, and at the center of this storm sits the king of New York himself, Jay-Z. For decades, Sean Carter has been the untouchable blueprint of success, but the walls are finally closing in. A bombshell leak has allegedly exposed the Epstein File footage, and the whispers that were once dismissed as basement conspiracies are now screaming from the headlines. We're talking about high-level federal scrutiny, secret tapes, and a trail of breadcrumbs that leads from the streets of Brooklyn to the most infamous private island in history. Gene Deal, a man who stood in the shadows of the elite for years, has stepped forward with a chilling confirmation. It ain't no alleged. He's breaking the silence on what really happened at those high society parties and the young girls who supposedly disappeared into the orbit of the powerful. From the controversial timelines of his most famous relationships,
we are producing more than 3 million pages, including more than 2,000 videos and 180,000 images.
To his deep-seated ties with industry predators, the narrative is shifting. Is the billionaire mogul truly on the run from a past he can't outpace? Buckle up, because we are diving deep into the dark web of power, blackmail, and the secrets the feds were never supposed to find. This isn't just music. This is a fight for the truth. The world knows Jay-Z as the ultimate businessman, the rapper who turned a corner store hustle into a billion-dollar empire. But behind the sharp suits and the fine art collections, a darker story is being told by those who were actually there when the lights were low. For years, these stories were treated like urban legends, rumors whispered in barbershops. But now, with the federal heat intensifying, the witnesses are getting louder. Enter Gene Deal. For those who don't know, Gene wasn't just a bystander. He was the man standing right next to the biggest names in hip-hop during the wildest era of the industry. And what Gene is saying now is enough to keep every lawyer in Rock Nation awake at night. He isn't using words like maybe or allegedly anymore. He's looking straight into the camera and telling the world that the allegations regarding Jay-Z and his past behavior aren't just rumors. They are a reality that has been hidden in plain sight. According to Gene, this goes back to the very block they grew up on. He talks about Miss Pleasant and a group of young girls from the neighborhood. This isn't just about high-profile celebrity parties in the Hamptons. This is about a pattern that started long before the world knew Jay-Z's name. Gene claims these young girls were part of a circle that was constantly around these powerful men. He mentions parties where the lines weren't just blurred, they were erased. The most chilling part of his testimony is the mention of the Epstein File. He suggests that the reason people are panicking now is that the names in those files aren't just politicians and tech billionaires. They include the elite of the music world who were operating in the same circles of exploitation. But it's not just Gene Deal's word against Jay's. People are revisiting old footage and old interviews that suddenly feel a lot more sinister. Remember the story involving Uncle Luke? Gene brings up a specific situation where Jay-Z was allegedly on a couch, watching young girls freaking off while he just sat back and observed. The claim is that Jay couldn't even take his eyes off them. In the past, people might have laughed this off as rock star behavior or just the 90s. But in the post-Epstein era, the lens has changed. We are no longer looking at parties. We are looking at potential grooming and systemic abuse. Gene Deal believes that as these files continue to leak, the stories people once laughed at are starting to align perfectly with the evidence. He describes a world where powerful families and legal teams go into defense mode the moment a name like Jay-Z is mentioned. The strategy is always the same: silence the witnesses, protect the public image, and let the lawyers handle the rest. But Gene says there are people who know the truth and have felt trapped for decades. They've watched Jay-Z climb the ladder of success while they stayed silent, fearing that speaking out would cost them everything. Now that fear is turning into anger. This leads us to the most protected name in the industry, Beyoncé. The official story, the one we've all been told in glossy magazine interviews, is that Jay-Z and Beyoncé met when she was 18. They say they were just friends for a long time, talking on the phone for a year before they ever went on a date. It's a clean, legal, and romanticized version of events. But the Epstein File rumors and people like Gene Deal are poking massive holes in that narrative. Gene suggests a completely different timeline. He claims that Jay-Z, who was born in 1969, was already deeply involved in Beyoncé's life when she was much younger, possibly as young as 17 or even 16. If you look at the math, Jay-Z was in his late 20s or early 30s during this time. Gene recalls seeing them in clubs like Club Eugene back in 98 and 99. If Beyoncé was born in 81, she would have been a teenager in a club she wasn't even legally allowed to enter. And then there's the Gabrielle Union factor. This is a detail that often gets overlooked but is now resurfacing with a vengeance. Gabrielle Union once mentioned in an interview that she went to junior high school with Beyoncé. Here's the problem. Gabrielle Union is significantly older than Beyoncé's official age. If they were in school together, it implies that Beyoncé might actually be older than she claims, or the entire timeline of her youth has been manipulated to make her relationship with an older Jay-Z look more acceptable to the public. Gene asked the question that the industry has been avoiding. Isn't she still somewhat a child? Even at 17 or 18, being pursued by a 30-year-old man who holds the keys to your career isn't a romance, it's a power imbalance. Gene argues that the industry protects this behavior by calling it love, but in reality, it's about control. The conversation doesn't stop with Beyoncé. It expands into the tragic story of Aaliyah. To understand the gravity of the allegations against Jay-Z, you have to understand his connection to the predators who came before him. Dame Dash, Jay's former partner at Rockefeller, has been vocal about his heartbreak regarding Aaliyah. Dame and Jay were both interested in her, but Dame is the one who ended up with her. However, the real issue isn't who she dated. It's who Jay-Z chose to work with after she was gone. Aaliyah had already been a victim of R. Kelly, a situation the whole industry knew about. Dame Dash has publicly questioned how Jay-Z could, in good conscience, go on to do a massive Best of Both Worlds project with R. Kelly after knowing what that man did to Aaliyah. Dame says that for him, that was the bridge burnt. He couldn't understand how Jay could prioritize money and a hit record over the respect for a young woman who had been traumatized. Dame famously said he left Rockefeller. He didn't get kicked out. He walked away from the millions because he couldn't stand the lack of morality. He saw Jay-Z choosing to align with a predator for the sake of the business. The timeline gets even darker. Jay-Z did the project with R. Kelly shortly after Aaliyah passed away. For Dame, this was the ultimate disrespect. It painted a picture of a man who didn't care about the victims, only the bottom line. This pattern of turning a blind eye is exactly what people are now linking to the Epstein situation. If Jay-Z was willing to work with R. Kelly while the world knew his crimes, what else was he willing to overlook in the circles of Jeffrey Epstein or Harvey Weinstein? Gene Deal is warning us that the floodgates are opening. He compares it to the 1-800-BAD-BOY number that started the downfall of Diddy. Once one person speaks, the fear starts to fade, and the stories start pouring in. He believes the feds are using these letters and these files to build a case that isn't just about one man, but about a whole system of sex escapades involving young girls that has fueled the entertainment industry for years. The narrative of Jay-Z being on the run isn't necessarily about him physically fleeing the country. It's about him running from a past that is finally catching up. The lawyers are involved, the publicists are working overtime, and the official versions of history are being challenged by people who were actually on the block. As Gene Deal says, "I did not lie, I know this for a fact." And as the Epstein Files slowly reveal their secrets, the world is waiting to see if the king of hip-hop can survive the truth. While the music world is reeling from the Jay-Z allegations, the Epstein Files have cracked open a door into a much wealthier, much more secretive room, the world of the tech elite and global power players. And no name in that room carries more weight than Bill Gates. For years, Gates has carefully crafted an image of the world's ultimate philanthropist, the man who wants to save the planet. But the newly released documents suggest that behind the scenes, Jeffrey Epstein held a grip on Gates that was far tighter than anyone imagined. According to the leaked files, we aren't just looking at professional meetings or charity discussions. We are looking at millions of pages of documents, and buried within them are draft emails that Epstein was writing to himself, essentially digital notes or logs of his leverage. One of the most shocking revelations involves a series of messages from 2013. In these drafts, Epstein sounds less like a business associate and more like a man holding a smoking gun. He specifically mentions Bill Gates, and the tone is one of pure, calculated pressure. The documents suggest that Epstein was tracking Gates's movements and personal life with terrifying precision. There is a claim in the files that Gates wanted certain old messages erased, digital footprints that he desperately needed to disappear. In the world of high-stakes power, you don't ask to delete messages unless those messages contain something that could end your career, your marriage, or your freedom. But why would one of the richest men on earth be asking a man like Epstein for help with his digital laundry? The answer might lie in a story so bizarre it sounds like a spy thriller, yet it's right there in the testimony. There are allegations that Epstein was leveraging information about Gates's health and private conduct. One of the most controversial claims floating through the documents is that Epstein knew about an incident where Gates allegedly contracted a sexually transmitted disease, specifically mentioned as the clap or chlamydia, from a prostitute. The story goes even deeper, suggesting that Gates was looking to obtain antibiotics through Epstein's connections to give to his then-wife, Melinda, without her knowing the true source of the infection. Now, we have to look at this with a critical eye. As the commentators in the footage point out, Epstein was a master of deception and a professional blackmailer. It is entirely possible that these emails were fiction created by Epstein to create a paper trail of leverage. He could have been spreading these rumors just to squash them later, making himself indispensable to Gates. This is the Epstein method. Find a weakness, magnify it, and then offer the only solution. Whether the medical story is 100% true or not, the fact remains that Epstein felt he had enough dirt on Gates to speak about him in this manner. Think about the dynamic of that relationship. Why would a man with the resources of Bill Gates need to deal with a shady figure like Epstein for private matters? This is what has people questioning everything. The draft emails are described as messy and confusing, reflecting the chaotic mind of a man who was juggling multiple blackmail operations at once. But the core message is clear. Epstein was keeping tabs on Gates's personal failures to ensure his own protection. This brings us to Melinda French Gates. For a long time, the public wondered why one of the most powerful power couples in history suddenly called it quits. Melinda has since come forward, expressing her disappointment and haunting discomfort regarding Bill's meetings with Epstein. She made it clear that she did not like the man, and she didn't understand why Bill continued to associate with him after Epstein's past had already been made public. When you look at the allegations in these new files, the stories of STDs, prostitutes, and secret messages, Melinda's decision to walk away with a multi-billion-dollar settlement starts to look less like a standard divorce and more like an escape from a sinking ship of scandals. As the footage asks, if a woman had to choose between $50 billion or a life tangled in the web of a man like Epstein, the choice seems obvious. But the damage to the Gates legacy is already done. The question isn't just about what Bill Gates did, it's about why he felt he had to keep talking to Epstein. Was it a business deal, or was it a hostage situation? The conversation then turns to the bigger picture. Some reporters and intelligence experts believe that Epstein wasn't just a party guy for billionaires. He was a bridge to foreign interests. The files show Epstein constantly talking about helping foreign interests and acting as a facilitator for people far beyond the reach of Hollywood or Silicon Valley. This wasn't just about sex. It was about data, influence, and the gathering of assets. The footage shows a specific, redacted email that sends chills down the spine. It's a message sent from a phone that says, "Unfortunately not. She looks okay. You should make clear that I don't work for Mossad." And then there's a smiley face. In the world of intelligence, that smiley face is a taunt. The claim being made here is that Epstein was operating as a CI, a confidential informant, or a full-blown asset for foreign intelligence agencies, specifically Mossad, in collaboration with others. If you look at the job of organizations like Mossad, the CIA, MI6, or the KGB, their primary goal is to gather assets. They need people in high places whom they can control. What better way to control a billionaire or a world leader than to lure them to a private island, film their darkest moments, and then hold those tapes over their heads for the rest of their lives? This is where the Diddy connection comes back into play. The strategy is identical. The drugs, the cameras, the freak-offs. It's an old intelligence tactic known as a honeypot or Operation Climax. You lure a target in with their vices, whether it's sex, drugs, or power, and you record it all from behind a two-way mirror. The commentators suggest that Epstein was the modern-day version of this operation, snaring high-level people into a blackmail trap that they could never escape. One of the most damning pieces of evidence for this intelligence theory is Epstein's connection to Ehud Barak, the former Prime Minister of Israel. He was caught on camera visiting Epstein's New York apartment, hidden behind a neck gaiter. Why would a former world leader be visiting a convicted sex offender in secret? The files suggest this wasn't a random friendship. It was part of a marriage between different intelligence agencies, a union designed to keep the world's most powerful people under a thumb. The web even extends to Ghislaine Maxwell's father, Robert Maxwell. His death was a mystery that still haunts the archives. Found dead, floating off his yacht. The official cause was a heart attack, but he was under heavy scrutiny for his ties to the CIA and Mossad at the time. The pattern is repetitive. The men who hold the secrets often end up at the bottom of the ocean or at the end of a rope in a jail cell where the cameras suddenly stop working. As we look at the wreckage of the Epstein files, the names of Jay-Z and Bill Gates are being dragged into a light they never wanted to stand in. It's no longer about conspiracy theories. It's about a documented history of blackmail, intelligence operations, and the exploitation of the young to keep the powerful in line. The world is finally asking, who was holding the camera and who was paying for the silence? As we peel back the final layers of this dark mystery, we move beyond the celebrities and the tech moguls. We are now entering a world where the lines between government, espionage, and organized crime don't just blur, they disappear. The question that has haunted the Epstein investigation from day one is, how did he get away with it for so long? The answer, according to the newly exposed files and veteran insiders, points to a sophisticated blackmail operation that was protected by the highest intelligence agencies on the planet. The theory being discussed isn't just a wild guess. It's rooted in the history of international espionage. The commentators in the footage point to a chilling reality. Jeffrey Epstein was likely a state asset. Specifically, the connection between Epstein and Mossad, the National Intelligence Agency of Israel, is becoming harder to ignore. But it wasn't just them. Experts suggest a marriage between Mossad and the CIA, a union where both agencies used Epstein as a tool to gather intel on the world's most powerful people. Think about the job of a spy agency. Their goal is to have leverage over decision makers. If you can control a billionaire like Bill Gates, a former president, or a music mogul like Jay-Z, you don't just control their money, you control their influence and the policies they support. The Epstein File isn't just a list of names, it's a catalog of assets. The footage dives deep into the history of Ghislaine Maxwell to prove this point. Her father, Robert Maxwell, was a legendary media tycoon, but many believe his true profession was that of a high-level double agent for Mossad and the KGB. His death in 1991 remains one of the most suspicious events in modern history. Found floating next to his yacht, the Lady Ghislaine, his death was ruled a heart attack. But at the time, he was under immense pressure for his connections to arms dealing and intelligence operations. The fact that a former Prime Minister of Israel and multiple intelligence officials attended his funeral speaks volumes. Ghislaine didn't just stumble into Epstein's world, she was born into the world of international secrets. When Ghislaine met Epstein, they created a honeypot operation that was far more advanced than anything seen before. This brings us back to the Diddy connection and the freak-offs. The pattern is identical. You create an environment of excess, drugs, alcohol, and young girls, and you hide cameras behind two-way mirrors. This is exactly what the CIA did in the past with Operation Climax, where they lured targets into safe houses to study their behavior and gather blackmail material. Epstein was essentially running a 21st century version of this, but on a global scale. The files contain a specific email that mentioned Mossad with a smiley face. To the average person, it looks like a joke. To those in the know, it's a confirmation of a sensitive relationship. One commentator notes, Mossad is like the sister of the CIA. They are joined at the hip like Siamese twins. They share information and they share assets. If Epstein was providing the CIA with dirt on foreign leaders and providing Mossad with dirt on American billionaires, he became untouchable. This explains why his 2008 plea deal in Florida was so incredibly lenient. He was above the law because he was working for the people who make the law. But now the marriage is falling apart. The leak of these files suggests that someone, somewhere, has decided that these assets are no longer worth protecting. The footage mentions how politicians and public leaders who once proudly stood next to these famous artists and billionaires are now nervous. No one wants their name connected to a system that history will remember as one of the greatest evils of our time. Look at the names again. Jay-Z, Bill Gates, Ehud Barak. These aren't just random people. They represent the pillars of culture, technology, and government. If the Epstein files truly contain footage, actual video evidence of these men in compromising situations, the entire structure of modern society could collapse. This is why the lawyers are in defense mode. This is why public images are being scrubbed. They are fighting to keep the official version of history alive. The tragedy in all of this is the victims. While the intel agencies were busy taking notes and the billionaires were busy deleting messages, hundreds of young girls were being trafficked through a system that saw them as nothing more than bait. Gene Deal's stories about the girls from the block or the young women at the Uncle Luke parties aren't just gossip. They are the human cost of a blackmail empire. Gene Deal believes that the truth is finally catching up. He says that the floodgates are open, and like a dam breaking, there is no stopping it now. He warns that people who felt trapped for decades are finally feeling the courage to speak. The fear of losing everything is being replaced by the need for justice. The conversation ends with a haunting question. Will Jay-Z or Bill Gates ever truly be held accountable? In a world where silence is bought and mysteriously floating bodies are a common occurrence, justice is never a guarantee. But the Epstein File footage represents a digital ghost that can't be killed. As more pages leak and more witnesses like Gene Deal and Dame Dash stand their ground, the wall of silence is crumbling. The era of the untouchable mogul is over. Whether it's the streets of Brooklyn or the offices of Microsoft, the shadows are being lit up. The feds have the files, the public has the stories, and the world is finally watching. The game of power, secrets, and control is reaching its end. And for those who were part of the operation, there is nowhere left to run. The evidence is mounting, the files are leaking, and the names involved are some of the most powerful people on the planet. But the real question is, do you think justice will finally be served? Or is this just another layer of a game played by the elite? We've seen the patterns, heard the witnesses like Gene Deal, and looked at the timelines that just don't add up. From the streets of Brooklyn to the highest offices in tech and government, the web of silence is finally being torn down. Now we want to hear from you. What do you make of the Epstein File footage? Do you think the industry is about to face its biggest reckoning yet? Or will these secrets be buried once again? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If you found this deep dive insightful, make sure to hit that like button and share this video to help the truth reach more people. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on all notifications so you never miss an update on this developing story. The world is watching, and the truth is closer than ever. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.